Lane Dilg is a senior advisor in the Office of the Undersecretary for Infrastructure in the U.S. Department of Energy. Lane leads work across over $1 billion in federal programs aimed at supporting secure, resilient domestic clean energy supply chains, bolstering the energy sector industrial base, and decarbonizing the industrial sector. Through a variety of programs and initiatives, Lane targets billions in public fundings to catalyze trillions in private investment for a net zero economy by 2050 and a just transition in energy in disadvantaged communities. Lane is here to speak more in detail about those opportunities, and we welcome her to the conference stage. So let's welcome Lane.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't tell you how nice it is to be here in Lexington with all of you. As I'm here, my bio was mentioned a little bit, but the reason I am here is in the Department of Energy. We are very focused in this moment on the exact work that's happening in this room, which is that we know that there are billions of dollars in investments going out from the federal government. And it is our goal that those billions of dollars in investment will catalyze the private sector to add additional, such that we are deploying really trillions of dollars in a clean energy economy. As we look at that, one of the things we are particularly focused on is how can we engage and how can we be in the very conversations you're having about what that means for American communities, and particularly for our energy communities that have powered the Industrial Revolution and powered the American economy for so many generations. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today and to talk a little bit in person, and also to get to meet and talk with all of you about the work that you're doing across Kentucky. And many of you I've gotten to be with before through the Interagency Working Group on coal and energy communities. So I really appreciate the opportunity to see some familiar faces in the room as well. If we can move to the next, oh, sorry, clicker. One. So as was mentioned before, I am with the Department of Energy in the Office of the Undersecretary for Infrastructure. The work that I do focuses particularly on the intersection between the billions that we are deploying in infrastructure and energy funds, manufacturing, and American communities. So when we look at the past years, we know that we are engaged in an energy transition with deep and real implications for American workers and for American communities. We also know that COVID-19 led to historic supply chain disruptions and exposed long-term economic challenges resulting from decades of underinvestment, outsourcing, and offshoring. But as you heard earlier, there are tremendous opportunities in the way those two things work together. So if you will pardon me for the slide that I drew myself, the analogy that the Secretary of Energy uses that I find very powerful in helping people across the country to really understand what the big picture looks like from the federal government's point of view, and as we talk about all of the investments that are going out, is actually a simple analogy related to the human body. So when we think about the bipartisan infrastructure law, we are thinking about the backbone. We are thinking across transportation, and it was mentioned earlier that in Kentucky, you are slated to receive some $5 billion for highways and bridges, $27 million for highway safety traffic programs, $69 million for EV charging, $204 million for airports. Very significant infrastructure investments that impact local communities, but that also help in a very real way to make our economy go. One of the things that can be hard to appreciate is that even as all of those funds are coming through your state government, there are also competitive opportunities that are making real differences in individual local communities and also for our supply chains overall. So one example that I will give you is that as you hear these billions of dollars, the Department of Transportation has announced selections in some of their competitive grants. They announced about $1.2 billion in selections under some of these grant programs that you hear about. Just one of those grants is focused on restoring and upgrading the 100-year-old Rockport Railroad Bridge, a huge win for communities and a huge win for the communities connected by that bridge, but also deeply significant to the entire nation's economy as we look at making sure that chemicals, grain, coal, lumber, and steel are moving across the country. So as we look at these investments, we think about the backbone. What are the fundamental pieces that we need for American competitiveness and American communities? And you'll see that the investments are quite significant. So some of the highlights here, $42.45 billion for reliable high-speed internet across the country, truly reaching and bringing that network across the country. In the Department of Energy, of course, we are deeply focused on ensuring the resilience and longevity of the grid. So making real and significant investments in our grid, both to enhance resilience, and we saw that, we have seen that in Kentucky, and we've very much seen it in Florida in recent weeks as they have been struggling to bring back up their grid, as well as $3 billion in a smart grid investment matching grant program and $1 billion to modernize electric generation facilities. So as we get sometimes lost in the billions, really focusing on this as the backbone of what we need for the larger economy across broadband, transportation, and grid. Then looking at transportation, ensuring that the United States is in a position to lead in new energy technologies. So a lot of focus on hydrogen right now. The hydrogen hubs funding opportunity announcement just went up, $8 billion for clean energy. $7 billion for regional clean hydrogen hubs, $10 billion for carbon capture, direct air capture, and industrial emission reduction, and $2.5 billion for advanced nuclear. So those projects really focused on how can we demonstrate the clean energy sources of the future, and how can we demonstrate how they will bring impact to and connect various pieces across the economy and our communities. We also are, and as it was mentioned, this is the area in which I particularly work, very focused on revitalizing domestic supply chains, but particularly on ensuring that we have secure, resilient, clean energy supply chains that, that support our domestic industrial base as we build out a clean energy economy. So we do have from the federal government $7 billion in the supply chain for batteries, an additional $1.5 billion for clean hydrogen manufacturing, and additional ones. I'm going to pause here for just a second. As you look at this, really recognizing that that intersection between manufacturing and the clean energy economy is where we stand to truly gain the most. This is the area where Kentucky is deeply leading in the EV battery supply chain, as has been mentioned with the Ford and SK Innovation, $5.8 billion, creating 5,000 jobs, and Envision with the $2 billion announcement, creating 2,000 jobs. Those kinds of wins are twofold. They both create the kinds of jobs that we are looking to create, high-quality jobs that allow American workers to raise families, as well as truly building out the clean energy supply chains that we need to achieve a net zero economy by 2050. So as we look at that intersection between manufacturing and energy, it is something we are deeply focused on, both where the challenges exist, where our domestic supply chains face risks, either as a result of climate resilience, geopolitical concerns, or otherwise. What are the key areas that we need to be supporting the base right here in the United States in order to be competitive and in order to create jobs that will sustain American communities for the long haul. As we look at that, we do also have programs that I particularly want to highlight that are focused on the small and medium manufacturing base. So the big projects get a lot of attention. The small projects also support communities, and they are essential to our work to build out clean energy supply chains. So a program that I particularly want to focus on is this $750 million Clean Energy Manufacturing and Recycling Grant Program. We expect a funding opportunity announcement there in the first quarter of 2023. That grant program is specifically focused on communities where coal mines or coal plants have closed, and it does provide support for small and medium manufacturers either to build new facilities or to re-equip or transition their facilities to step into the clean energy economy. There's a lot of flexibility in the program, so it can be effectively any clean energy supply chain that a small or medium manufacturer is looking to step into. But we are very focused on that program as an opportunity to showcase what our small and medium manufacturing base can do in transitioning into the clean energy economy and in creating high-quality jobs for American workers. We also do have considerable funding going out to small and medium manufacturers to improve their operations, enhance productivity, and achieve net zero wins at the same time. So as has also been discussed, and I know there's some real experts on this in the room, we are very focused on ways that smart manufacturing can not only increase productivity for our small and medium manufacturers, but also decrease emissions along with energy efficiency and energy management measures. So additional money there, $400 million, as well as some additional funds that we'll talk about in a little bit. And then investing in the American workforce. So bipartisan infrastructure law recognizing that the true backbone of our economy is our American workforce, and truly investing in that workforce and ensuring, particularly in the clean energy economy, that we have pathways where American students and workers can step into career-long pathways across certificate, credential, degree, pre-apprentice, and apprenticeship programs, and really be learning the skills that will be adapting, changing, and evolving, but supporting American families for many generations. So we look at the bipartisan infrastructure law as the backbone. We then look at the CHIPS and Science Act, and this analogy is referred to as the brains. So in the United States, we invented the semiconductor, but we have recently produced only approximately 10% of the global semiconductor supply. As we look at that, the CHIPS and Science Act, making major investments both on the research and development side, $67 billion to the Department of Energy to enable cutting-edge research and development, advanced computing and manufacturing research, and $10 billion in regional innovation hubs focused in this space. But there's also in the CHIPS and Science Act $52 billion to build out semiconductor development, manufacturing, and workforce development. And we've talked a lot about public investment catalyzing private investment. This is another space where you do see that already occurring. So you see Intel breaking ground on a $20 billion semiconductor complex outside Columbus, Ohio, and Micron announcing a $100 billion investment in upstate New York. So as we look at the CHIPS and Science Act, these are the key components that we need to ensure that our clean energy economy is driving the global economy forward and is consistently at the cutting edge of that economy. And being highly attentive there to the ways that manufacturing developments on the shop floor are driving and interacting with research and development occurring in labs. So recognizing that we do not want to only be doing the R&D side of the semiconductor space, but also that without the manufacturing side, our R&D side ultimately suffers, that these two are inextricably linked. So going back, and then the third piece of legislation that Congress has enacted that is essential to the big picture view is the Inflation Reduction Act. This really is the heart and the lungs intended to get the private sector off the sidelines, to make significant investments in highly capital-intensive industries, and then to provide tax credits that ensure that costs over the long run will be cost competitive. So the Inflation Reduction Act, we really look to as ensuring that the clean energy economy and the transition has runway and has legs over a considerable period of time. We know that for a net zero economy, we're trying to produce some 950 million solar panels, 120,000 wind turbines, all by the end of the decade, millions of electric vehicles, and thousands of miles of transmission lines. So the Inflation Reduction Act, and particularly the tax credits within it, ensuring that the private sector is catalyzed to step forward into that space. And of course, as we talk about climate and resilience, the Inflation Reduction Act putting our country on track to cut emissions 40% by 2030 from 2005 levels. As we look at these pieces of legislation in the Department of Energy, the focus really is on deploy, deploy, deploy. So it is our job to try to target public investments, to ensure that they catalyze private investments, and to ensure that we are building out the clean energy economy in a way that will be successful and sustainable over the long term. As we do that, I apologize, and here are some of the grants, loans, and tax credits from the Inflation Reduction Act. As we do that, we are deeply focused on what that means in a place-based manner. Again, recognizing that every dollar that goes out goes into an American community. And wanting to be here both today with you and throughout this process to really understand and work together how we can best create projects that are successful from a commercial perspective, but also successful from a community perspective. As we do that, one additional program that I do want to highlight is the Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Act. This is an up to $250 billion loan authority in the Department of Energy that is focused on retooling, repurposing, and replacing energy infrastructure, and provides a lot of opportunity for private sector and community creativity to try to understand how we best use the infrastructure that we have. So as we look at the funding that is coming online from these different grant programs, we are particularly focused on not just building new, but also transitioning, working with workforce development across the country, and working with infrastructure as well to try to use and to the best of our ability the assets that we have, and to use those within communities, also diminishing negative impacts on communities. A couple of other programs that I just want to be sure people are aware of. Down at the bottom, you see the energy improvement in rural or remote areas. This is a $1 billion program where the request for information was just put out last week, I believe, that's focused on improving cost effectiveness of electricity generation, transmission, and distribution systems in rural communities with less than 10,000 residents. So this is a very significant program that we are very focused on having the highest impact possible for our rural and remote communities with this $1 billion. As we do that, we do genuinely want your input. We know people are exhausted by the many requests for information that are coming out, but these programs so important that we be working together to deploy these funds in ways that truly work for you. And then just a couple of quick notes to give you some insight into how we are thinking about funding opportunities and other things in the Department of Energy. So we do have this DOE approach to community benefits. You will see this in our funding opportunities that is focused on ensuring that community benefits are flowing from the programs, particularly those that we are competitively funding. So as we look at this, you're likely familiar with the Justice 40 program, ensuring that the benefits of federal programs are reaching disadvantaged communities. And in the Department of Energy, those are particularly communities like fence line and borderline communities that have borne energy burdens, but not always received the benefits. Also focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and focused on good jobs, making sure we have community benefits plans in the beginning that really focus on how jobs will be created and high quality, good paying jobs will be created through the projects that the Department of Energy is funding. I believe it was talked about a little bit earlier, the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities and Economic Revitalization, which almost certainly needs a shorter name. We unfortunately have gone down to IWG because if you say that 4 times in a meeting, the meeting is over. The administration has identified priority energy communities. The thing that I particularly want to focus on today is both that when you look at energy communities, there are a few different things that are happening. So I mentioned the 40209 grant program for small and medium manufacturers that is particularly focused on communities where coal mines or coal plants have closed. The Inflation Reduction Act also includes a number of incentives, incentivizing private industry to bring projects into energy communities, but with a slightly broader definition. And that definition, we do expect Treasury guidance on the exact, and hopefully a full map on the exact IRA definition of energy communities coming out. But we also do have efforts to try to work across federal agencies. You've heard from so many of us, you've heard about so much of the work that we're doing, really trying to bring together federal resources and make them more approachable for communities, and particularly communities in a transition space. So as we talk about using energy infrastructure and the loans program at the Department of Energy, obviously that intersects very heavily with the EPA Brownfields program that you heard about earlier. On the inside, we are working very hard to work together, but the Interagency Working Group in the has also launched a rapid response team in the Illinois Basin that is really focused on bringing together interagency opportunities across Kentucky and the Illinois Basin. So really want to focus your attention there on that opportunity to engage ideally directly with one person who has a deep understanding of the opportunities available to communities across multiple federal agencies. A few different links there. I know you have so many links. These are also in the slides. But really want to focus with all of you and just thank you for being here today. Raise us as a resource and create the opportunity to really work together. I am here on the ground in part to talk, but also very much largely to listen and to understand the work you are doing across economic development in communities across Kentucky and how we can best link and interact with that work. So really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to be with you today.